Okay, there we go. Can anyone hear me? Apparently I am heard. All right, good. So, hey everyone, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss at Internet Shitlords. And yes, I have arrived. And I'm here tonight. I got a couple of things to talk about, I'm sure, and I'm sure that you guys might have also questions to ask, and you know, in lieu of there not being an episode of inappropriate characters, there'll be one in 2 weeks, I believe. So you heard it here first. Check back with us in the 28th, I think, will be the next episode of inappropriate characters. All right, so we got a good crowd. Oh, that's kind of strange. There were like 40 people waiting for me to show up, and now there's only 33 watching. That's a bit odd. There's a bunch of people that are just waiting to see if I'd bother to show or not, and I said, okay, fuck this. um, all right, so these things happen, I guess. Um, Sadwings Rage just asked me if I'm monetized. I am monetized, yeah. All right. They were waiting for the cats, says Indigo Dragon. Yeah, yeah, they might have been just waiting for the cats. I don't know if the cats will appear. As usual, I don't command them in here or something like that, right? So if they make an appearance, it's going to be of their own volition. And if they do, it'll probably be to come in crashing through everything. Big Chungus will crash through everything in front of the camera, knocking over the camera, throwing down my Yerba Mate, my Airs of Indra book. Everything will go flying. But, that's just par for the course. So, just getting my pipe lit here. We'll be waiting, let some more people in. Oh, we're up to like 50 now. That's nice. A lot of people wanted to check out my live stream tonight. I am going to talk a bit about the Olinsky Rules, but before that, those of you who had been waiting had seen that I had up as the thumbnail for those of you who are waiting a slightly modified version of a meme that came out that was tweeted by Tracy Hickman, creator of Dragonlance, co-creator of Dragonlance, of course, with Margaret Weiss. And I hadn't had a chance to talk about this on my channel yet, but if you check that out, it's basically what that meme is it's divided into two images. Above, you have an image of the characters, a drawing, of the characters from the Critical Role D&D themed reality TV improv show. And underneath, you had a the classic image of the Fellowship of the Lance, or whatever you want to call it, from Dragonlance, right? The Company of the Lance, or I don't know which one they would be. And in the caption above, the original version, the version that Hickman had, it said, reject modernity, and then in the bottom one with Dragonlance, embrace tradition. And of course, people went insane about that. And then a bunch of them tried to get Tracy Hickman canceled, tried to get Dragonlance canceled, tried to get D&D canceled. They claimed that this was a fascist quote. It isn't. It's a quote from Umberto Eco, and Umberto Eco was definitely not a fascist. It's not. It's not a slogan as such of fascism. It is a statement of traditionalism, and there's lots of very famous traditionalists that were in no way fascists. And of course, my version that I just put up here was one that I think was shared on the RPG site, where the caption above the characters from Critical Role are saying, "We want you to notice us, senpai," and then the Dragonlance people below are like, "We just want to have adventures," because that's what's normal. Um, and it is really funny how they made these attacks, because in the process, of course, they also attacked the very idea that one should be allowed to like traditional gaming, right? That this goes along with the reasons that they want to destroy, the SJWs want to destroy the OSR, the reasons that they want to destroy traditional fantasy stories, that they want to remake or warp or alter beloved science fiction series, and in order to make them into a thing that isn't tradition and isn't myth and isn't, legend in the classical Western sense. And the arguments that they made were frankly absurd arguments, right? The arguments that they were making was, but look at that Dragonlance party, right? They have no diversity, right? they're not in any way diverse. They're not interesting, right? They're not unique, right? And in fact, take a look. If you take a look at that picture, there is actually much more diversity going on in the Dragonlance group than in whatever the fuck the Critical Role group is, right? The Critical Role people are a bunch of freak characters. You can't tell what they are. They have no definition. They're all just one big mushy mess of the same thing. They aren't unique. They aren't different. They're basically all some kind of non-human creature with possibly, there's a couple there that might be humans. I can't quite tell. But they're all the same kind of like emaciatedly thin kind of, I guess that would be millennial chic. They all look like they could be living in a back alley somewhere in Seattle. They're all gray and they all look depressing. That you can't tell what any of them are. You look at that and you're like, well, which is the warrior? It's you don't even know, right? Which one is a rogue? They all look like rogues, right? Which one is a wizard? Well, they're all glowing and shit. They're all wizards, right? There's no diversity in there, right? The fact that they're all different races. No, they're not. No, they're all just humans doing cosplay. There's no other race there because they have no defined race. They're like Air Genasi and Asimar and who knows what else. They're Goblet. Like none of those are things that have an actual definition as a fantasy race, because they're just made up crap from postmodernism, right? They're just an excuse for you to dress yourself up and in your character being a inhuman appearance with an inhuman coloration and with chic looking appearance, but there is no actual archetype that you're representing by being that race. And if you're not representing an archetype, you're just a human in drag. That's all you are there, right? Whereas on the other hand, if you look at the Dragonlance image, right, you have men and women that look definably as men and women. There's a couple in the top picture you're pretty sure are women. The rest of them you're sort of sure are men, but you don't know for sure, right? So there's actually more definable genders in the lower one, right? You might say, oh, there's no trans people. Okay, yeah, there isn't, sure, but there's two definable genders that you can see at first glance. Whereas in the one above, there's only one basically, which is this kind of non-binary, right? So far we're on the score of gender, Dragonlance wins 2-1, right? On the term of races, there's clearly a dwarf, there's clearly a halfling. I mean a kender, right? But it's for legal reasons they weren't halflings, I guess. And then there's a guy who's a half elf. Right. Now, the half-elf, you might not quite be able to tell that he's a half-elf, but there you go. So in terms of fantasy races, there's variety there, right? In terms of human races, there's more variety than the ones above. The ones above, theoretically, those, what are they, 8 characters? 6 characters? I don't know. Whatever they are, they don't have any definable race that you can look at first glance and say, yes, that is definitely an elf. The other one is definitely a dwarf, right? So in effect, their score is 0, right? Now you look at, in terms of human races, well, it's pretty clear from that particular rendition that these guys all look pretty white, of course. Except, of course, for Raceland, who looks a little bit pale, right? Raceland looks like he could, like, if he wouldn't have just, he wouldn't just murder them all. He could kind of hang out with the characters from Critical Role, but that's because Raceland's a villain, right? And that's the character that would fit with the characters from Critical Role. They're not heroic in the least, right? They're at best kind of weirdo, self-absorbed anti-heroes, and which is pretty much what Raceland is, right? So the guy that used to be the exception, the weird one that was going to eventually betray the party and everything else, is now the norm for the postmodern SJW gamer, right? In terms of human races, anyways, it's obvious from that particular artistic rendition that there doesn't seem to be any variety of other human races in the sense of ethnic backgrounds, or well, in the sense of skin tones, because in the sense of ethnic background, of course, two of them are meant to be a kind of barbarian tribe of sort of Native Americans, but they really don't look like Native Americans. So we're gonna say, yeah, that one's kind of a draw. But to pretend that the one above is full of human racial diversity is nonsense. None of those are humans, right? Or the one or two that are, it doesn't matter because you can't tell, right? So there's like no race there. They're not any human race to define, you know. So it's not, you know, that's not more diverse. There's not more difference. In the lower picture, in the Dragonlance picture, you see a clear definition of roles. You look at the pictures of the guys there and you go, okay, that guy on the far left is obviously a wizard and probably a bad one, right? And then you got a guy next to him there that's clearly some kind of a warrior. You've got a dude that you look at that and you say, that's a ranger, right? You can tell who the bard is. She's holding the lute, right? There's another guy back there is clearly some other warrior class also, and a woman who probably is too. And then there's a couple of others. They might be, well, I'm not sure exactly what they are. The dwarf is surely a warrior, but you've pretty much defined them, whereas the other ones have no definable class whatsoever. So in every respect by which we could measure some kind of diversity, even, of course, diversity of ideas, because the characters in Critical Role are all modern 2020, you know, Biden voting SJWs, whereas the characters from Dragonlance were characters that had multiple different ideological agendas in the novels, right? And I'm not a huge fan of Dragonlance, don't get me wrong. I don't believe that Dragonlance is a great work of literature by any measure. It's a third-rate Lord of the Rings clone with a bunch of Mormonism added in. And it's also actually a moment in terms of D&D history when D&D kind of started going off the rails because it started becoming more about selling novels and RPGs being about drama than about the world, okay? And so I'm not a fan of it. But certainly, if I had to choose between having to sit through a campaign of Dragonlance and a campaign of whatever the hell Critical Role is, I know where I'd be going, right? And it's just pathetic that that they can't even understand how they're attacking it, right? Like the SJWs want to pretend that they've created a more diverse world. They haven't in every respect. When you look at that difference, that whatever it is, 30 or 35 year gap between when there was Dragonlance and when there is Critical Role, what has happened instead is that there's been a complete collapse of any meaningful diversity. The goal of the extreme left is to make nobody different in any way, is to make everybody only superficially, like, how are they more diverse? Okay, there's one way in which the Critical Role crowd is more diverse. They have more diverse fashions. They're dressed more diverse. That is what the shallow, pathetic definition of the neo-Marxists' idea of diversity, right? A diversity would be, we all have to think the same. We have to have the same beliefs. Anyone who doesn't have the same beliefs is going to end up in a gulag. But you can dress however you like as a way to show how we celebrate our individuality, right? So that's anyways. I guess that's the basics of why I put that up there. I wanted to do this rant and didn't get around to it until now. Let me take a look here at some of the comments because I just kind of was making that whole rant while I was taking a look more at the meme image than at the comments. Um, oh, wow. Quite a lot here. Okay. Reject modernity, embrace tradition. Yeah. Um, Greetings from Brazil, from Paulo Frota. Thank you, Paulo. I wonder if it's as hot where you are as it is where I am right now. It's it's nighttime here. It's like 10 p.m. and it's like 26 degrees. Yeah. Celsius, by the way. So, because if not, you're going to be confused as to why I'm saying that's hot. Charlotte Williams says Hickman is also a Mormon, and they hate Mormons for some reason. Well, they do, of course. Mormons. I mean, they hate. The SJW left hates all Christianity, right? And I'm saying this is someone who's not a Christian. I have no skin in the game as far as personal belief here, right? But the SJW left despises all Christianity, but it especially despises successful Christianity, because they're perfectly okay with this morally ambiguous, no longer actually believing Christianity that is the vast majority of Christians. Because in most of the Western world, if you want to find real, true Christians that absolutely buy the paradigm, that they're in completely with true and genuine and sincere belief, you probably have to go to Africa and maybe some of the poorer parts of Latin America. You are not going to find it in New York City, right? The Catholic Church, except for the Catholic churches in places like the Philippines or Africa or maybe some areas of Latin America, they don't actually believe it anymore. It's obvious to everyone. The Pope said climate change is more important than abortion. There's no, he literally just said, well, you don't actually have to be Christian to go to heaven a little while ago, right? He essentially claimed you don't need the intercession of the church, right? He basically argued that Martin Luther was right? So he doesn't believe in anything. Most Protestants don't believe in anything, right? They'll go on, most of them are actually just from birth, right? They're not into it. And some of them will go to church and they'll sing the songs of praise, but they might complain about, family values or something like that, but they don't have this deep-rooted paradigm of belief that they, in the literalness of their story, right? Whereas Mormons do. And so Mormons are the biggest threat, because Mormons have been super resistant to the infiltration of the SJW movement, right? Mormons also continue to engage in early two-person marriage and having kids, Well, yeah, some versions of Mormons more than two people, right? But we're not going to get into that. But they have lots of kids. They raise those kids with their values, right? These guys are a danger. They know that when the time comes that they finally roll out the tanks and start moving people into the camps, the one place where they're going to have a really big problem is going to be Utah. It was set up to try to protect them from the persecution of other Christians, but it's going to end up being their attempted stand against the SJWs. So yeah, they do especially hate Mormons, and of course the fact that Dragonlance is myth is enough, right? Because they want to destroy all myth, but Dragonlance in particular has this kind of family values type of myth, which is one of the things I don't like so much about it, because I'm more of a classicist myself, right? And this is Dragonlance is a very Americanized, specifically Mormonized version of that same myth that is something like Lord of the Rings, right? And that you see in other versions in other sagas, right? So it's something that they see as a big problem. Sad Wings Raging says 59 people here. There's 97 now. Under 20 thumbs up. The 5 stats here, I know why they didn't hit thumbs up, but the rest of you have no excuse. All right. So listen to Sad Wings Raging, guys. Hit the thumbs up there. Help make this video popular. Make it big. Dr. Spider says, I blame postmodernism. Well, obviously. Paulo Frota says, reject modernity, return to first edition. Well, if you really want to reject modernity, play Lion and Dragon. Or Arrows of Indra, right? Arrows of Indra is definitely about the original mythic world. Profanarchy says, the critical role SJW Shoggoth thing. Yeah, that's a good description of that image, you know? It's really what it is. Some goes to Tanler and says, some Lord of Chaos is at work here behind the woke brigade. Sadwings Raging says, Seattle, the Emerald City with a real he, her, she, him, it behind the curtain. Just not a beep / boop, right? Bob the Odd says, do we get some meatball or chungus? You must have missed my mentioning in the introduction. As is typical in my videos, neither meatball nor chungus are forced to be in it. If they show up, they're going to show up on their own. And given that this is a live stream and the tradition of the times they've shown up in the live stream, they're almost really going to knock over all of this or knock down my camera or just tear right through everything and cause a huge disaster. So we'll have to see. You're going to have to keep watching to see if they show up. What else have we got here? Sadwings Raging says, not enough mana sacrificed to summon the Castors. Well, you know, I don't know, but I've heard that if you go and you buy World of the Last Sun, that increases the chances. It's like a sacrifice to them. So you might want to go check out my newest game. I don't have the book yet physically with me because lousy South American mail. But the World of the Last Sun, you'll find the link in the description below. It's a gonzo weird fantasy setting, which you can use whole or in parts. It's very modular. You can take entire pieces out and add that piece and nothing else, or just mix and match as much as you like into your campaign for weird fantasy or gonzo. It's made very system neutral, so you can use it in any OSR game. I mean, it was originally a game that it's the world setting based of my DCC campaign, which has now just reached this last weekend, its 8th birthday. We've been playing for 8 years straight, that campaign, and it's been a wild ride. The funniest campaign I've ever had. Probably the funnest, I will be honest. It's been hilarious. So anyways, check out World of the Last Sun. If you buy some, then maybe Big Chungus will show up. Not promising, just saying maybe. There might be a link of some kind between those two events. I'm not guaranteeing there is, but there could be. Braddock says, but the Dragonlance people are all white, therefore evil racist. Did we get to the puppet titties yet? Someone asks. Well, yeah, I already did a whole video about the puppet titties. So if you haven't seen it yet, go back. I think it's 2 videos back on my channel, and you will find there where I talk about the large boobed puppet. Let's see what else we've got here. Yeah, puppets were last week's show. Chibi 1986 says, archetype trumps narcissism every day of the week. Well, exactly. Now that's a perfect word that you use there for that image, that picture of the characters from Critical Role. If I was to represent a value that those guys in that image are trying to embody there, it would be narcissism. They all look like they're tremendously self-absorbed freakazoids, right? That are just intensely interested in their own deal. Whereas the Fellowship of the Lance, you look at that image, and you can see that they're all people that are like, struggling through something, right? They look weary in that picture. They're waiting for, trying to hold out the night, and they're united with each other for the most part. Again, they put Raceland off to one side. It's a very artistically, it's not my favorite style of art. It's a way too 80s for my taste, but artistically it's got certain qualities, right? Like, but they're, you can tell that they're all, working together and suffering together on some big quest, right? And the other one, they're all just standing there going, look at me, right? Because they want to show off how special they are, which is the main thing that you see a lot of these Critical Role newbies that come in and start trying to play D&D think that's the point, that the point is to make yourself some purplish green humanoid of no particular race, invent a ridiculous backstory, obviously you have to do artwork about how they look and post that on Twitter, and that's it, you've played D&D. Because anything else doesn't matter. All that matters is that you show your guy, right? Which is meant to be a reflection or an extension of your own ego. Not that you're actually trying to play something different than yourself, because that would be weird. So this is how horribly wrong they all are. Mm-hmm. Sadwing says, diversity of thought shall not be tolerated in role-playing games. Yeah. Mm. Charles Marlowe says, hello, Final Boss and others. Hello, Charles. JKD Buck says, I'm scared that the USA failed its saving throw against communism. Yes, I am also scared of that. I am very concerned that there is a precipice there that you guys are at risk of not being able to come back from. I think it's not totally too late yet. But the fact that there was certain events transpired in the past couple of months that I can't actually talk about here, and the fact that I can't talk about it here tells you a lot too, right? But the fact that those events transpired and that nobody stopped them from transpiring, is just horrifying, right? And it's stuff that you've seen in places like Venezuela and Cuba, right? So this is where you're going if it doesn't get turned around. Riddle of Steel says, I was naive enough to buy the Wildemount setting from Crit Role. It is the most hilarious gazetteer I ever read. 30% of the characters identify as this and that and have pronouns. Let's see what else we got here. Andrew Michael Schaefer says, you folks like DCC? Well, I freaking love DCC. I think it's one of the reasons why I've made a medieval authentic game and I did not make a gonzo / weird fantasy game is because, in essence, I don't think I could make a gonzo game that would be better than DCC. I knew I could make a medieval game way better than D&D, so I made Lion and Dragon. But for the gonzo stuff, I'm playing the game that I already think is really fantastic for it. I might have changed a few details here and there, but it's generally speaking really great. Paulo Frota says, Lion and Dragon is currently my favorite game, the game I wish AD&D was when I started playing. Thank you so much, Paulo. The rest, everybody else, if you haven't checked out my products, be sure to take a look. You can find links to a lot of them in the description below. It's a good way to support me in my efforts both of game design and of doing YouTube products and YouTube work and stuff like that, because they kind of go hand in hand. So if you want to support me, I mean, I do have a PayPal and a Patreon page, but I would suggest that the easiest way to support me is to buy my books. And if you can't buy one of my big books, check out my small books, my RPG Pundit Presents PDF series, where you've got 103 issues there that range from 99 cents to $4.99. And so you buy one of those, you're going to find something. One of them will be a topic that you like. You buy that one, and you've got something you can use in your games, but you're also, it's like you're buying me a coffee or something. Anyways, now back to the catching up on the comments. You guys are doing a lot of comments. Dracopol says, RPG Pundit ran a DCC campaign for a long time. I know I haven't. I'm still running that DCC campaign. Every 2 weeks, we've been playing for the last 8 years, and it is still going on. There's an emergency going on in the world of the Last Sun. It is still going on. So we're proceeding along with it. As of right now, Bill the Elf is waiting to try to figure out how to do a path to immortality. Boy is still alive, in case anyone asks. Usually we get someone around here who'll ask that. It's a great game. Where were we here? Dracopol says, the cats may knock your games down, but the SJWs never will. I sure hope so. Commodore says, pasa un mate, man. Well, you know, one of the greatest things that has changed in Uruguay, like Uruguay, this here, yerba mate, is the national drink. It's a kind of herbal infusion, right? And it's drunk like this. I mean, I'm using a silicone holder. The original one would have been made from a gourd, and a lot of people, traditionalists, still do that, right? And if you were really traditional, it was done in a gourd that was lined in leather, made out of a bull's testicle. And then you drink it. Boiling hot water is poured in there and then sipped up here through a metal straw, you will note. That's not being environmentally friendly. It's always how they've done it, right? So it's a weird, and the first time you taste it, you're like, I think this is horrible. And then suddenly you go, wait, no. And you're like, I don't know if I like this or not, but I need to try more. And pretty soon you're drinking a yerba mate all the time, right? But in Uruguay, beyond that, there was the tradition that yerba mate would be passed around from one person to another. So you'd get together with 5 of your friends. You wouldn't each be drinking your own gourd. You'd have one collective gourd that you would take a sip, you'd pour it in, pass it to the next guy, right? And obviously when the COVID thing hit, that was one thing that changed in a big way, because Uruguay is one of the only countries in the world that never had a lockdown. We have not had and still do not have a lockdown. There are people who are wearing masks, and there are some places where wearing masks is obligatory, but it's not universally so. You can be anywhere out in the open air without a mask, for starters, right? And so there's very, very, you have to wear a mask on buses, for example, and in public buildings. But anyways, the point is that not a lot changed. But one thing that I think has changed in a big way is that I have since the COVID thing began, I haven't seen anyone sharing their mate, because I was quite expecting that because of that one tradition, we could have ended up having with a massive inflation rate, but it didn't happen. People immediately freaked out and said, no, we're all just going to drink our own from now on. Propanarchy says, World of the Last Sun is worth the cover price for the drugs section alone. Yes, in World of the Last Sun, you get not only a section on magical drugs, right? The magical pharmacopoeia of the city of High Bay, which has all kinds of cool magic drugs that you can take that will do powerful things, but also screw you up. But then it also has, in that same section, a complete selection of the OSR mechanic effects, as to say, the D&D type effects that I would think would be correct, it would be authentic, to use one of my favorite words there, for actual regular drugs. And if you've ever wondered just how cocaine should work in your RPG game, there's one way to try it. Ghost of Tanalorn says, are demi-humans white or just alien species that appear white? Well, exactly. Demi-humans, this is the key question, right? It is the correct answer is that non-human races of any kind are by definition not human, and therefore they don't have anything to do with the racial categories that people try to invent for humans, okay? Or the actual, the differences in pigmentation between humans or anything like that. That's irrelevant to those races. They are meant to be something completely alien. They're not meant to represent other people or other races. They're meant to represent archetypes. They represent vice and virtue, right? They represent different symbolic concepts. They're not just other people. But the way in the postmodern world that a lot of people play it, because people in the postmodern world can no longer understand archetype, their assumption is, well, this is just a human in cosplay, and it's just a human that represents something else about being that it's just representing another type of human, right? So in other words, it is like as though they were a human of another race. And therefore, I guess a white elf would be white in the human sense, right? And if they were a non-white elf, if there was a Latino elf, sorry, a Latinx elf, because probably quite a lot of the elves would be Latinxes, right? Then they're not, they're obviously prejudiced against, right, or something like that, because they can't live outside of the eternal now of these kind of Maoist Pol Pot-esque concept, right? That's their existence. They don't. They have no understanding of anything greater than their immediate material lust, and it's horrifying. Craig Lighton says, I bought Star Adventure and I really like it. Thank you. Star Adventure is another great product you can pick up from me. The link is the second link in the description below. And it is a short book. It's only $9.99 in print and PDF. You get the print and PDF copy for just $9.99. And it is my take on a set of rules, OSR rules, based on Lion and Dragon for space opera style adventuring. It's only a 30-something page book. It's not very big, but it's very packed and very complete. It is a complete RPG. So do check it out if you're looking for something to add to your collection of space opera type stuff. Darren P says, I hope the Mormons win. Yeah, well, you remember, I don't know if you know, but you remember back in the 80s when the Baptists and the Catholics and the Mormons all hated each other and fought with each other a lot, when they had powerful differences to the point that, the Mormons, for example, they wouldn't even include them in political, religious right political movements for a long time because, they are a very weird offshoot of Christianity, right? They're definitely, to every other Christian branch, major heresy, right? And that was back when they thought that was important enough to say we have to exclude these guys, right? Not recognizing that at the same time, massively psychotic Marxists had taken over every level of the education system. Their children were being taught by people who were fans of Pol Pot and Stalin. And they were arguing because, the magic plates and the planet Kolob was just a step too far for the Southern Baptists, Which goes to show. Hallowed Unrest says, where do you go to try to play OSR style games online? Great question. I have no idea because I do not like to play anything online. I play with actual people. Ironically, I am playing right now an online campaign of the playtest to my upcoming Invisible College RPG. It's coming along very nicely. The playtest seems to be going very well. The system seems to be working well. So we continue advancing on that front. Eric C. says, here in the USA, I'm very worried things will go south real quick. I have prepared for it as much as possible. Well, if the way things evolved in places like Venezuela are any indication, then the USA will, in certain respects, go south real quick. There'll be certain things that will start to happen very, very quickly that will, I'm wondering when it is that they're going to, for environmentalist reasons, nationalize all farms, for example, or something like that. How long it'll take to get to that step. I mean, we know the goal is you will own nothing and you will be happy, right? That's their command, right? You'll be happy about owning nothing. The goal of the Great Reset. So, and they keep saying it. They themselves continue to admit that that's what they want to do. They want to forcibly change the world and be in charge of it. So I guess we're gonna see. We'll see how quickly that happens. I'm just glad I live in a country where the motto of my country, where I'm living now, is liberty or death. Except I get the feeling they really mean it because in the face of, they're one of a tiny group of countries in the face of COVID that said, "Oh yeah, we might die." Well, not everybody here said it. Of course, the communists here wanted an immediate lockdown, but. The president, and he had the support of the majority of the population, said, well, we might die, but I'm not going to take away from a man his right to go to work. That's what he said, and that's a pretty good deal. I never had very many good things to say about Uruguayan politics until this year. Darren P says, I think Canada is lost already. Oh, Canada is beyond lost, my friend. It is full blown totalitarian, absolutely, where you can be imprisoned for any reason. Canada was lost when they arrested and tried someone for tweeting a mean tweet to a feminist. That was when it was lost. But now basically the lockdowns there make it very clear that the Canadian government at every level, including the Conservatives in Ontario and, conservatives, conservatives in very heavy quotes, they all believe that the population of Canada are chattel and should be treated however they think that, the elites decide they should be treated. And that extends everywhere, right? Like maybe the West, if people in the West stand up and start fighting, they could declare their independence, break away, Western secession. The problem is now they'll have a hostile neighbor to the south as well, but that might maybe in time, I don't know. I think the situation is not optimistic. Dark Knight of Hibernia says, Pundit, you need to make a supplement of crusading through the froglands. Let me kill those worthless frogmen scum. Well, I'm not working on that right now, but I'm going to tell you what I'm working on next in terms of Lion and Dragon. Right now, I'm working on a campaign of the Silk Road. So, where theoretically it's a campaign book where you could play, European traders, adventurers that are going all the way from Damascus to China. Along the Silk Road, and in the year 1191, when Richard Lionheart has just shown up and retaken a bunch of cities that Saladin had taken. So the next book after that will probably be a book on the actual Third Crusade. So there you have it. That's the way I'm planning to roll with that. Atlas Unplugged said, I think Professor Dungeon Master over at Dungeon Craft is on a red pill slow drip. He's not there yet, but he's been very critical of the latest products. I'm not sure who that is, but great. anyone who gets red pilled is good. We need as many as we can get. Let me see where we are here. Jesus, I'm like way back still. So where to meet other players online to play OSR, Lion and Dragon games online with? I don't really know what to tell you, Hallowed Unrest. You might want to check out the Inglorious OSR group on Mewe, or you might want to check out the RPG site, start a thread there, see if there are people that want to play online. It's hard. I don't know. I don't do any of that, so I couldn't really give you good advice about where to find people to game with, in random people to game with online, Riddle of Steel says, Professor DM is a teacher in real life, nearly 55. No way in hell he doesn't register the weirdness. But being a teacher, he is part of the system and needs to thus be silent. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Dark Knight of Hibernia says, why a bull's testicle? Well, it's actually the sack of a bull's testicle. It's a bull's ball sack, right? And I guess that was a not useful piece of leather for other things back in the old days. I mean, it's a very old tradition, right? Wayne Brack says, when they have to put social rules in a book as if D&D players are 6-year-olds, like, don't touch another player's dice, Wizards has gone nuts. Is there an official D&D book where they've now put don't touch other players' dice? I've never noticed that. Don't tell me it's the 5e Player's Handbook. Andrew Michael Schaefer has 8-year-old twins that have to go to bed, so good night, Andrew. You're probably already gone. I'm way behind here, so Sorry about that. Gonna skip over some comments that I would like to comment on, but otherwise I'm not going to get to my second topic of the night. Dracopol says Evil Hat is silly. They're out of cash because they cater to leftists who don't play anything, use Lovecraft's properties for free, and then dump on him because he's dead. There was some comments about Evil Hat above. Well, the thing about Evil Hat, at least, they're a lot less silly in a way than Hasbro is. The people that run Evil Hat are, their own company. They're extremist SJWs. Of course, they're going to do stuff like that, right? Like, these are guys that are, and I mean, in our free enterprise world, if you are a pair of rampant leftists that want to make games that are going to be full of rampant leftism and want to promote rampant leftism in your product, you have every right to do that. You have every right to go bankrupt doing it because, as you pointed out, Dracopol, SJWs never actually play RPGs and barely buy them. So it is silly because they're bankrupting themselves for nothing, but it's at the same time a lot less silly than Hasbro executives allowing Wizards of the Coast to wreck itself with this toxic ideology. Because, the people that are running Wizards and running Hasbro should not ever be listening to a plan that involves them making less money, right? They should be going for what's going to be the most successful. And they've already got, everybody has ample evidence. After Star Wars, after Marvel Comics, after Doctor Who, after what's happened to all these franchises that listened to this idea of this fantasy utopia that the SJWs tried to present, where they would make money by hating their own audience and by promoting social justice ideas. After every one of those has failed, it is impossible for me to coherently believe that there's any industry executive who still thinks that that's the right way forward, right? That's the way to have a successful product. So they're just being idiots now because they're afraid, because they don't want to personally be called racist. They know that they're signing off on projects that are going to doom parts of their own, corporation, might eventually doom their whole corporation, but they're going to do it anyways because they're scared of someone calling them a racist. Judd Gosswick says, any update on the Invisible College? Well, I already mentioned we're in the play testing of it. I've seen some more art. It's all coming forward. It's looking good. Eric C says Bill Gates owns over half the farmland in the USA. Yeah, it's very funny, that reject modernity, embrace tradition is not itself a fascist, an inherently fascist concept, contrary to what the SJWs say. But you know what is an inherently fascist concept? The very definition, the entire concept of ideological fascism, namely Italian ideology. Before there was ever, the funny little German people running around in their Hugo Boss suits, there was Italian fascism, and the Italians were the ones that basically defined what it was, right? And Italian fascism is an alliance between industry, large industry, and the government, where they are working together in a pseudo-controlled economy, not a fully controlled economy, and in that way are also regulating the lives of every citizen in the state, where basically it's a team up between giant corporations and the government to make an utterly dominant state. And that is the model of the Great Reset. They're literally open about it. I just saw a video from the Lotus Eaters where they're showing a video of the people of the Great Reset, where they're saying, no, we're not bad people. What we're going to do is we're just going to get corporations are going to trust us, and then we're going to work with those corporations to change society in every way. That is literal Mussolini fascism right there. That's the model. That's what they're doing. So it's very, very funny. Of course, they're doing it, not, yeah, they're, I mean, fascism was never an exclusively right-wing concept, actually. Like it is a type of socialism. So they're doing it with a leftist, environmentalist, social justice bent, but what they're doing is literal fascism. Maybe the Mormons will save us all. We never know. Hallowed Unrest says maybe Edmonton would join Texas. Well, Alberta maybe. Edmonton is actually the most liberal part of Alberta, but one would dream, but I don't think that geographically that would really work. I guess you could try to do like a country that was a line all the way from Texas, going up through some parts of the desert and the mountains there until you got to Alberta. Where was that? Charles Morrow says 100% agree. Final boss, I live in BC. We should leave Canada. Yeah, well, the big problem BC has about that is Vancouver and Victoria, which are extremely bought into the federal idea and are extremely leftist, and they're going to have a lot of resistance to BC separation. Alberta and Saskatchewan don't have that problem, but I don't know. I'm not sure if BC would be able to pull off a referendum on independence. Ben says, make a version of Silk Road where you have to RP an online trading system used for narcotics. That would probably happen in the world of The Last Sun, actually. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. Thaco says, I've got a bone to pick with you, pundit. I heard you were talking smack about Savinelli's. Yeah, well, Savinelli's, the thing about Savinelli's like the one of the big mass producers of pipes. They have, first of all, they have like 18,000 models, and I'm exaggerating a little, but like most pipes will have a line of 7, 8 models at the most. If they have the full line from like, this is a dirt cheap pipe to this is a $1,000 alpha pipe. Savinelli is just all over the place. It's got all kinds. And sometimes you have no idea what they're meant to be or what their ranking is, right? But beyond that, the vast majority of Savinellis are just not, in my experience, they're not as good a quality as what you could get for whatever rank it is, paying the same price for a different pipe, for a different brand of pipe. So like the worst Savinellis that might cost you $60, 70 or $80. For $80, you could probably get a Ben Wade, which is going to be better than a Savinelli. And the Savinellis that cost, $100 or $200, you could get a Lorenzetti like this one, which will be better than the Savinelli. So, sorry, we're having a pipe fight right now, guys. But so this suddenly escalated to a pipe fight, I guess. But there we go. And the best Savinellis, the ones that might cost, I don't know if there is a Savinelli that reaches the $1,000 range, but let's say there was. You compare that to the highest range of a Nerup pipe, for example, and the Nerup's got it beat. Even like the standard $100 pipe, if your choice is between a Savinelli, a Stanwell, or a Peterson, the first choice there is definitely a Stanwell, and then Peterson is the second choice, you know. Anyway, so I think I'm caught up. I can't believe this. I believe I am caught up now with 97 people watching. All right. So, second topic. I had seen something the other day, you know. Okay, let me start again here. One of the problems that we have is that SJWs are very, very well trained in the technique, and some of them don't even realize this, but they're very well trained in the technique of fighting in a dirty war. You know, and they've been taught in some ways how to do this in their universities, or nowadays maybe even in junior high school, for all I know. But I mean, along with the indoctrination, right? That they've been taught in a way of thinking, for sure, that says, well, nothing is really true, so it doesn't matter, you know, if I openly lie about someone, because if I feel, you know, if I feel like this guy is a racist, that means he probably is, because my feelings are the most important thing in the world, right? So I could just call him a racist. I could claim he did something racist, even if he didn't, because I know he probably did, or if he didn't do it, he probably meant to do that, right? So like this is where you get these kind of these kind of absolute dirty tactics. And of course, the right, you know, fighting that kind of war does not come naturally to them. But it doesn't help that the Dracopol is saying second topic. This is the second topic. I'm on the second topic now, Dracopol. It doesn't help at all that the right tends to sometimes completely misunderstand and hasn't bothered to look into the details of the way that the other side thinks and how to use that against them. Because there is a lot of ideas, I think, that the other side just being this kind of mustache twirling evil in general, and so we don't have to bother to look at that, right? So I'm going to talk about Olinsky today because you really need to read Olinsky's Rules for Radicals. Okay, that is one of the basis for the techniques being used by most SJWs today, and most regular people, of course, have never actually looked at them. You might have heard the term. A bunch of you probably go, oh yeah, I know Olinsky Rules. Yeah, fucking Olinsky. Goddamn, Olinsky did this, Olinsky did that. But did you read it? I mean, do you even know what he's talking about? Because I saw a post. I saw a post that got retweeted multiple times that talked about Olinsky's great program to take over the different institutions and how he's scheming to, you know, we're gonna control the welfare state and blah blah blah, and none of that. Everything in that quote was just made up. It wasn't actually Olinsky at all. It was actually, it looked to me a lot like a standard conspiracy theorist type claim of what, you know, has sometimes been ascribed to the communists are going to do this, the Freemasons are going to do this, you know, the Zionist conspiracy is going to do this, your enemy of choice is going to, you know, the Italians, whatever, right? It's this, the secret cabal of taking over the world, people. And if there's one thing that the right has to stop doing, is making up its own fairy tales about secret cabals taking over the world. Because there are people really trying right now to take over the world, and every time you fall for the QAnon bullshit, you end up helping them, because you are causing harm to the ability to fight the people that are really doing the attack, and to fight them in a way that would actually be effective. Okay? So the fact that this quote of Olinsky was being massively retweeted by people on the right, when it was very clearly nothing to do with what Olinsky believed, you know, or what he wanted to actually do. Olinsky was essentially a destroyer, right? He was not someone that he didn't have a real plan of what to do if you took over the institutions. That wasn't his deal, you know.
And his goal was to create as much conflict as possible in order to tear things down. Now there are of course people on the left who are working to take control and are figuring out what to do with that control. That is stuff like Davos and the Great Reset, and they're completely open about it. It's not some secret conspiracy. You don't need a QAnon. You go and look at their videos too, right? And if you're not looking at their videos, you're not going to understand what they're doing. Okay? So you have to grasp this. And in fact, by understanding them, when I read Marx, that allowed me to understand how to attack Marxists. It didn't turn me into a Marxist. It taught me everything I could see about what Karl Marx wrote, how he was wrong, where he was occasionally right, what his ideas were, and also how much the typical, of course, because the typical leftist hasn't read Marx at all, right? And they have a theory in their head, a fantasy in their head, just like people on the right seem to have a fantasy in their head about what Alinsky was about, And I guess they've just run with that. Well, people on the left have a lot of them haven't read Marx either or Alinsky, but Alinsky's been trained into them somehow, and elements of Marx have too, but their vision of what Marx was about is very different, because especially the postmodernist movement, they have been trained more than anything in the ideas of Foucault and Derrida, who were not Marxists. They were in a way anti-Marxist communist anarchists. Marx would describe the modern SJW movement, which is the child of Foucault and Derrida via the tactics of Alinsky and feminist radicals. Marx would have described this as a false revolution of the bourgeoisie against the working classes. That it's the middle class, college educated people making up a fake a fake conflict based on things like race and gender and sexuality instead of class, and using this to further oppress the working class. Which, when you listen to that, that's pretty much what they're doing, isn't it? I mean, that's their whole purpose. They want to punish, harm, and oppress the working class. But of course, they are communists. They're not traditional Marxists, but they are communists, and part of what they want in the long run is to create this pseudo-communist world that's actually, the division in the left is between the Pol Pot camp, which are the really scary guys, and then the guys that are looking at their model as modern China. And the modern Chinese model has more in common with Italian fascism than with Soviet communism, right? It's much closer to Italian fascism, that corporate state alliance. And that's why the people, the Davos, the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset people want to create that exact same alliance to strip away the idea of individual rights and properties and create a West that is utterly beholden to a superpowered technocratic state that is meant to especially benefit a very high-ranking corporate class of oligarchs and nobody else. That's what we're fighting against, okay? So, I can understand why a lot of people might not read Marx. Marx was a very prolific writer. His texts are huge. They're not easy reading. They're mostly boring, and because he's not a captivating writer. There's a reason why he almost failed completely to catch on, right? It was really just that he had a few dedicated true believers that were better at kind of translating what he was saying for other people. But we were this close to Marx just dying in complete anonymity and never having had Marxism. Unfortunately, it didn't come to pass. But okay, take a look at the Olinsky Rules, right? Those are very, very brief. And if you don't know them, you don't know how to fight back against them. The rules for radicals, right? There are 13 rules for radicals. The first one is power is not just what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have. And that is something that the SJWs have used against us all the time. Constantly. They've been constantly using that against us, right? Because they will call for a boycotting campaign, and there's like 12 of them, and they have no purchasing power, but they create the illusion that they have massive support, and creating that illusion creates this fear of this idea, because the guy working at Lucasfilm, or the guy working at an RPG company, or the guy working for a comic company or for a game company or whatever gets 500 tweets at him in an hour and gets 1,000 emails in a day, and he'll be terrified, right? He'll be convinced that everybody in the world thinks that what he's doing, whatever he's, that if he doesn't fire the guy that they want fired, then he's going to be, he's going to be lynched or something, right? He's going to be attacked at his home, stuff like that, right? So the power of the perceived power that these people have, that are 8% of the general population, that are a tiny group in any aspect of what they're in any hobby, in any company, in anywhere, and are mostly hated by everybody else in there. But because they can create the illusion of size and of influence, they beat us far too often. So why are we not creating that same effect? Because there are far more of us than there are of them. And if we can organize ourselves, if every time that they sent a censorship, they started a censorship campaign, we started a counter censorship campaign that was just as aggressive, that made companies just as afraid, or the goal would be to make them more afraid of us than they are of the SJWs and what we're going to do to their company, then they lose. They lose the whole deal, right? If they're afraid that we're more capable of ruining them than the SJWs are, then we've won the entire thing. Just rule number one, So if you can learn that, and if we can start to be willing to do that, to be as aggressive and to give as much of an impression of power and size, and we have more people, we're more powerful, we're more sizable, and we actually buy products. They don't buy anything, right? So in terms of pushing corporations, what you have to do is you have to get organized in the same way they're organized. When they decide something, when they say cancel Gina Carano, they all suddenly shift towards that, and everybody knows it's like a battle cry, right? They call it out, and every SJW knows you're going to post it everywhere, tweet it everywhere, email everyone, and do this so that everybody that is involved in the decision-making process of whether or not to fire Cara Dune, is going to think that there are tens and tens and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that want her fired. And then they're going to be completely shocked the next day when it turns out that that wasn't the case. So it has to do with being able to give a mass impression, mass bombardment of protest, and to do it with great swiftness and great order, right? That's just rule number 1 of 13. So if you can learn the other 12 rules, and you can figure out how can we use these rules, because there's nothing in that's the thing about Alinsky's rules, actually. They're remarkably neutral. They're rules for radicals. It's not rules for leftist radicals. They are rules for anyone who wants to fight the system, because like I said, Olinsky was fundamentally an anarchist. He wanted to tear down everything in front of him, right? He wanted to create conflict. Obviously, he was also personally a leftist, right? And he envisioned that this was going to be used by, anarchist / communist / hippie organizers to create action that would disrupt the institutions in a community. But the left are now the institutions. Therefore, Alinsky is the most important thing we can be reading right now in terms of how to fight back against those institutions that are not ours anymore. They are theirs. And if we have to, because somebody asked earlier in this stream, they asked, well, do you think we're already too far gone? Well, I think we're at the point now where we have to realize that we may not be able to recapture any of the institutions as they currently are. We'll never be able to bring back the K to 12 school system, the university system, the Hollywood, the government bureaucracies. We may have to be willing to engage in radical action that is meant to disrupt all those institutions, to disrupt them completely. And in the hopes of, we have to basically say, okay, if the left has taken over that institution, then it's better if we destroy that institution and build a completely new one and immunize it against leftist takeover than that if it stays in the hands of the left. And the rules for radicals are what can allow you to do exactly that. Feel free to prove me wrong now if you don't agree with me, but this is what I think is, if there's one thing I would advise everybody to start very carefully studying in terms of how to beat the SJWs, it's Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Let me take a look here at some of the comments. Charles Marlowe says, I've read some Marx, some wonderful ideas. Unfortunately, it always works out horribly for the population. I've never found any of his ideas particularly wonderful. His ideas were pretty horrific, even in their original context. He had a completely mangled view of the idea of how to go about shifting the injustices of society. So, I know, okay, yes, the idea of the ultimate communist utopia, but that's just a fairy tale. You might as well be writing about, wouldn't it be wonderful if there was a world where, where pipes grew fully made on trees and and where it rained, iced cappuccinos, like this is, it's just fantasy, right? Sadwings Raging says the French are more base than the Republican Party. Yeah, oh my God, that's so funny. I don't know if you guys heard about this. Some of the people here might not have. A bunch of French intellectuals and prominent politicians recently put out a statement that France needs to separate itself from the influence of American social justice and critical theory because it'll destroy France. So the French establishment, which is quite lefty, obviously, if they were in any other country, they'd be total. You'd look at them and go, "Oh, that's the most goddamn socialist thing I've ever seen," right? The French establishment is more willing to stand and fight against the real threat of the extreme left than the Republican Party of the United States of America, right? Now, there's an institution I still think we can take back. We can't take back the supposedly apolitical institutions. They've all been infiltrated to such a degree that I think it might not be possible. We can only hope to take back the conservative institutions, things like the conservative parties, right? Like the Republican Party in the US or conservative parties or elsewhere, the Tories in the UK, right? We maybe can take back some churches, right, which have also been infiltrated and completely and badly subverted, right? But maybe those places, being inherently conservative institutions, might be somewhere where we can fight back and reclaim those particular institutions from the influence of the critical theory left, maybe. But other things, I've been saying since a decade and a half at least, that the entire university system has to be torn to the complete fucking ground, and you make something new. Make a new system that is not a 700-year-old relic that has now been completely subverted by ultra Pol Pot communists, Let me see here. What other comments have we got here? I know many, Darren P says, I know many people that are afraid to speak up for fear of losing their jobs and pensions, mostly military, police, and firefighters, with some medical types as well. Well, in some cases, that's forgivable. In others, it isn't. I think if you're a hardworking employee of just some random company and they're starting to demand that you go to, critical race theory seminars to learn about your inherent racism or something like that, and you decide because you have little kids, because you have a mortgage, to be quiet, to not fight back, to not say anything, that is forgivable. It is understandable, at least, and it is forgivable, right? If you just lay low and try to get past it, I think it's wrong, because I think that if every little schmendrick in the, in every little company were to stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do this, if you did it at the same time, it would all be over. But I can understand why they might do it. But police, for example, and the military have taken oaths. And so when you have the police acting as the enforcers of things like speech laws, or in fact, an awful lot of the lockdown laws that have been created, really funny that last year started with the radical left talking about how all cops are bastards and defund the police and all of that. And now they're the ones that, they realize that they now own the police, and that all that talk has disappeared. And as far as I'm concerned, any police officer who has not stood up to fight against the lockdowns, who has actually been an active agent in enforcing things like the shutting down of businesses, of people engaging in their God-given right to make use of their property and to engage in commerce, the pursuit of happiness, then those guys, screw them. Sorry, but screw them. They should actually, if the day came where there would be a reckoning of all of that, they should be punished as much as all of their superiors. That maybe really believe this, but if you're a cop, or if you're in the military and you're too afraid to stand up to what when they ask you to do something that is a violation of the constitutional rights or the basic human rights of your own citizens, you are duty bound by your obligation, by your oath, to refuse to obey those orders. Anyway, let's see what else there is here. Hallowed Unrest says, the message from Alinsky is not to stand for anything and to put destruction first. To do that would be to be just like them. Oh, well, here we go. Well, we can't just be like them, right? The point is, they are now the institutions. If you're being oppressed by the institution, you have to destroy the institution to stop being oppressed by it, right? You don't want to be oppressed by Hollywood anymore, then you have to work to destroy Hollywood. You don't want to be oppressed by the school system anymore, you have to work to destroy the school system. And by destroy, I'll note for the sake of YouTube that, and because it's true, I'm not talking about, insurrection or anything like that. I'm talking about protest and mass campaigns meant to destabilize, peaceful campaigns of protest, direct action in the Olinsky style meant to destabilize these institutions, right? And I don't care. People have been saying this to me since 2004. Since I became the pundit, right? They've been saying, oh, but, if you're fighting with them, you're just as bad as they are. I'm like, no, I'm trying to save you from them taking over the game industry, making you play games that you're going to hate, or making you leave the industry, right? And if I have to do anything I have to do to stop these guys, I'm going to do it. And if you think I sound like a big meanie for that, well, great, but I'm fighting for you. Like, I'm doing this because Because if we don't do this, we're going to lose with dignity, right? The argument of, oh, you'll be just like them, you won't be. You're using their methods for a completely different goal. If someone breaks into your house and grabs a knife and starts stabbing you, and you have you get a knife in your hand and start stabbing them, you're not just like them, right? You're doing something. You're doing the same thing that they are doing. You're attacking them in the exact same way that they're attacking you, but you're doing it for a completely different reason, to save your own life from their assault on your home, right? Anyway, it's all fun and games. Says conservatives don't build, they retain, so that's a lost cause. Yeah, well, that's a fundamental problem. That's why I don't really like defining myself as a conservative. I'm a cultural libertarian, right? If your vision of conservatism is just keep everything the way it is and try to hold the line, you are doomed to extinction, right? What you need to have is a right wing that is not conservative, a right wing that is liberal in its general classical sense of value, right? That believes in free trade, free enterprise, free speech, free association, that believes in the individual liberty of every individual person to live their own life the way they want, as long as they don't try to force anyone else to, right? That's the fundamental deal. And then within that, it has to be a movement that has ideas of what they want to do in the future, that isn't just don't change anything, because that's not the way, that's not the way reality works. So there are ways to change and build and grow, right? Like the Victorians were not conservatives. If you're a conservative today, you might think, well, in the good old Victorian days, that was a conservative world. No, that's a world that constantly changed and grew, right? They accomplished great things, and you have to seek to accomplish great things. If not, you're falling into the same mistake that all these cultures that were destroyed by Genghis Khan fell into, where they were at their absolute peak of sophistication, right? The Song dynasty in China, the Arabs in the Middle East, and the Persians, they got completely flattened by Genghis Khan, and then after a couple of centuries started coming back again. But then they decided, well, we're going to be exactly like what we were before that, right? So the Ming were basically a copy of the Song that were trying to be ultra traditionalist and ultra conservative, and said we're changing nothing, right? The Ottomans did the same thing, where they got stuck in their place because they venerated the past slavishly and therefore failed to grow. That is not the way to do it. Darren P says, if you have honor and integrity, we find it hard to use their disgusting tactics. Well, hold your nose, Darren. Just hold your nose and do it anyways, because you are fighting. You're fighting for not just your life, but the life of the next generation, of all generations to come. You're fighting for the light of civilization itself, Thaco says if pipes grew on trees, they'd all be Savinelli and Pundit would hate them. That's my very own Twilight Zone episode, right? Like I suddenly end up in a world where all the where all the trees have pipes growing on them, but they're all Savinellis. People talking about upcoming elections. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Some people pointed out to me that the recent French stemmings, Macron was one of these people. The current French president is a weird little shit, and definitely not a proper right winger. Not to mention that he married his old science teacher or something. You know, he's got a mommy fetish or something. Anyways, Macron was one of the people that supported this recent petition, but that maybe the reason he did that is because elections are coming up, and he's probably pretty worried that the French right wing is going to kick his ass, because he has not been doing well. Let's put it this way. I can't remember. You know, I don't know what he's at now, but I think that there was a period of years where he was at 20% support. Are we still going here? Because I see something about the chat being disconnected. Oh, well, I guess. If you're still listening to me, I don't know how you can tell me if you are or not. I mean, it seems like it's still running. I still see 93 people there. I don't know what happened to the chat. That was not me. Maybe someone posted something that got the chat shut down. Huh. Well, I don't know. Without the chat, this is losing a lot of its fun, I've got to say. So I guess I'm gonna have to try to wrap it up at some point here. Yeah, I don't know what happened. It was, let me just take a look here. Maybe it's just me. Is it just me that it's not getting chat? Or, oh, no, I see it now. Okay, I've got it. Yeah, apparently the chat shut down for me there. Sorry, guys. Okay, so we can still go on a little longer, I guess. Though I've already been, doing 76 minutes of stream. Okay, we're still good. We're still good. Let's see what else we're talking about. So I was talking about Macron, right? Like, I can't remember the last time he had like 20%. The problem is in Canada, you know, some people are talking about the Canadian election. Trudeau is tremendously hated. He's not popular. The last time he won with only 38% of the vote. And he's probably going to win by about that same amount this time. His party will, you know, even if he's personally unpopular, his party is, you know, 38% is about what their standard is, right? But the problem is that there's no conservative opposition to him, no real one, right? The conservatives in Canada are literally at this point just liberal stools. You know, they're like, we're exactly like the liberals. Everything that we stand for is exactly like the liberals. But we're not the liberals. We're a different color. So it's just pointless to vote for them. Nobody on the right is going to vote for those people. Because they would be, you know, they'd be exactly the same, you know. There needs to be well, again, I don't think Canada's savable. There needs to be a Western separatist movement. It needs to have a Western separatist party that does well. And then it needs to break away as quickly as possible from Canada. I don't think Hollywood is savable either. Some people are making comments about Hollywood. The entire Hollywood system is going to go down eventually. I don't think we can ever have a Hollywood that will go back to being appealing to everyday average Americans. It's entirely designed now to work as an assault on everyday average Americans. So I think that that's another place where this is going to have to be torn down, you know. And you see, I think you're going to see it's going to be easier than ever, because for a long time the problem was, you know, how do you create a viable alternative? But the thing is now, between what happened in COVID, between the changes in terms of many places becoming more open to filming and things like that, the technology being much easier to do, special effects are easier to do, everything has become easier and cheaper to produce. There's no special reason why you can't get anybody making, you know, why you can't get either a literal alternative Hollywood, be it wherever it is, you know, somewhere in Tennessee or something like that, or just a large scale movement of openly libertarian and conservative right wing producers making movies that are not explicitly right wing. So, like you've had a Christian films industry for decades now, but it's not going to help if it's a ghetto, right? So the point is having people that believe in American values making movies that are not meant to preach about anything, right? If Hollywood is preaching constantly on the left, and if you're not preaching on the right, like none of my games, for example, preach to you about anything, right? You could be a right wing, left wing, or anything in between, or not caring about any of that, and you could buy any of my products, and you're not going to be preached at, right? You're not going to be you're not going to be preached at either as the choir or as somebody that is being attacked by what I'm writing. So this is what you have to do with popular media. You have to create alternative popular media that is alternative because it is apolitical, and because it is just based on certain core values, but without any kind of explicit political or religious affiliation that will be interpreted as propagandistic. By the viewer, I mean, right? Obviously, the SJWs will accuse anything that is neutral of being, of being alt-right, basically. So there you are, Chibi says, Pundit, what's the chance we'll get something like Drive-Thru RPG without the pause or disclaimers and junk? I don't know. I think it needs someone with enough money to do it, and time, and people that have the programming skills to do it. It would be really excellent if there was a competitor to Drive-Thru RPG. It's obviously extremely worrisome that there's such a monopoly on the RPG delivery, let's say. It would be really, really good if there was a way to find an alternative. And it just needs someone that's willing to try on a big enough scale and that has the resources to do it. But the problem is it's a very small business. It's a very small business. So like if someone has that amount of money, they'd also have to be doing it as a labor of love for RPGs. Because I don't think nobody's getting rich over Drive-Thru RPG. Not even the people that own Drive-Thru RPG are getting rich off Drive-Thru RPG. They're probably making a good living, because I mean, I'm making a good living selling stuff there, so they're probably making a better living than me, but they're not making a fortune. So anyone who's going to go up against them isn't going to make a fortune either. Hallowed Unrest is saying goodbye. I'm sorry if I missed that. Let me see here. Yeah, Tarantula says Pundit's IT skills strike again. Yes, they do. I am so bad at this. For somebody who spends all his time working online, I'm inept with anything to do with computers, with any electronics actually. Here in this country, you have all the floors are basically either tile or hardwood. You don't get carpeting, right? Like that. I didn't have a single carpet in my house. And so my cleaning lady the other day, so it's normal that one wouldn't have a vacuum cleaner, right? Because you'd clean with you'd clean with a broom, with a mop, etc. Right? You don't really need a vacuum cleaner. But my cleaning lady had suggested a few times in order to get like dust and cat hair out of corners or stuff like that, that it would be a really good idea to get a vacuum, right? And I finally had to break down and tell her, look, here's the problem. Every vacuum cleaner I've ever bought, doesn't matter if it was the cheapest piece of garbage in the world or if it was like, a $1,000 super deluxe vacuum cleaner, every single one I've bought breaks down immediately, right? And it's not just vacuum cleaners, right? One of the reasons that I make my coffee on a Vietnamese coffee filter with no electronic component whatsoever is because coffee makers would also break down for me, right? Electric kettles break down for me. I am so traditional that high technology falls apart around me, with the sole exception being communication technology. It doesn't fall apart around me, but I'm just no good with it. Anyway,
What else have we got here? Lots of people talking about Hollywood. I'm going to skip forward a bit just to get there. What is pause? That's a good question. Darren P says it means fully corrupted and woke. That is how I'm going to choose to interpret that word. If that was like some kind of dog whistle word, that is absolutely not what I had no idea what the word is. So. Sad Wings, I've tried everything, but anyway. I'll probably break down and eventually get one, and then I'll never touch it. It'll just be the cleaning lady's work to use it, so that it'll that way hopefully it won't break down. All right, I think I'm at the very end here. We've gotten to the front. You got number 2 and number 3 of Olinsky's rules. Never go outside the expertise of your own people. And number 3 is whenever possible, go outside the expertise of your enemies. That's a really, really good rule. The SJWs have constantly done that in gaming. You saw that in the Forge and other story gaming movements. They will. This is combined with Foucault. What they do is they invent new language and new meanings for words. They control the language and they use that language in the definitions of all of their arguments. And then they do not allow you to use other language. So you are starting by having to argue against an argument that they've created with a set of assumptions that already fulfill what they actually are trying to present as their final thesis, right? So you'll never have a chance arguing against them in that way. In general terms, what we have to do is push away from the valuing of anything that they consider correct and important in terms of how to use terminology. You know, you want to turn their words on them the way that they've tried to turn normal language on us, and you want to essentially use the arguments of fields that they have no ability in to break them down. They have no ability in so many things, right? They're only good at this point, because this is one of their weaknesses, is at this point they're basically only good at critical theory bitching. They have no discernible talents of any other kind, right? They're not good writers, they're not good filmmakers, they're not good comic makers, they're not good politicians, they're just generally bad at almost everything. Even when it comes to trying to kill people, they tend to be really bad at it, right? Like, you know that the death tolls at the hands of Antifa were meant to be much higher. It's just that they're really, really bad at fighting, you know, and at attacking people. Fortunately. So, which gets us to the next rule, which is that ridicule is man's most potent weapon. There's no defense. It's almost impossible to counterattack ridicule. It infuriates the opposition, who will then react to your advantage. Never let yourself be bothered by their attempts at ridicule, and always be better at ridiculing them. If we aren't able to mock them ruthlessly and effectively in a funny way, if we're not funnier than they are and better at insulting than they are, we're going to lose. And this is part of why they've hated me for 15 years in the RPG hobby. Because if you read my blogs, they're full of ridicule and they're very funny. If you read my videos, I'm constantly ridiculing them and I'm trying to be funny, right? By doing this is one of the areas where the right has somewhat learned this lesson now, and it took a long, long time. You know, I was not a constant viewer or listener of Rush Limbaugh, but you know, Rush Limbaugh is apparently gravely, gravely ill right now, and I was thinking about his legacy. There was one thing that Rush Limbaugh did that I think changed the whole scenario more than anybody else did,
And it wasn't just about talk radio, because there were other people that did talk radio that were conservative. The way he did it was very clever, that's true. But the big thing, the big switch, is that before Rush Limbaugh, right-wing people were humorless suits. And they were always expressing their disapproval and outrage, at the rock and roll music and the satanic D&D and this and that, right? And they were always, or at more legitimate things too, right? I'm not just going to start with that. They're always expressing their indignation in very well dressed in little suits, commenting about how awful the Democrat policies on healthcare are. And Rush Limbaugh changed that forever. Instead, all he did is he turned it around and started mocking them, ruthlessly mocking them. He became funnier than the left-wing pundits were, because he would mock them in a way that was very brutal, but at the same time, that was very, very funny to watch. And I remember, way back, when Clinton got into Somalia there, and the way Rush Limbaugh made fun of the search for Warlord Adid or something like that, right? And so you'd have the head of Warlord Adid popping up somewhere, like a little cartoon that would just show up there, and this is when he was doing his TV show, right? And it's like, oh, there he is, we found him. How come Clinton can't, And that sort of mockery, it just completely threw them on their asses, right? They were like, they didn't know how to react to that, right? Because they were used to somebody that looked like old Tucker Carlson, which was ironically the younger Tucker Carlson, the little guy in the bow tie that would sit on Crossfire and have this relatively not funny debate with another guy in a suit that was a Democrat, right? And the left figured out faster than almost everybody on the right what Rush was doing and copied that into their own left-wing humor, and that's how you got stuff like The Daily Show. But it was really Rush Limbaugh that started that. And then stuff like The Daily Show, all of that, meant that for a while, the left actually made use of that tactic better, except that as they've become more extreme, they've become, by obligation, more humorless. And as the right has become more open and libertarian, it has become more capable of humor. But we owe it in great part to Rush Limbaugh. So, I raise a yerba mate gourd to him for what he did. Because nowadays, there isn't a single funny leftist left, I think. There's none of them. They're all incapable of effective humor, and they're all so easily upset and offended by ridicule, right? And so we've had masters of ridicule that have been going in there. I think one of the big jumping moments was Milo Yiannopoulos, where he was, say what you will about Milo Yiannopoulos, he was magnificent at making feminists and other SJWs go absolutely insane. And this is one of Olinsky's rules, right? It also, the election of Donald Trump in great part was, I think, thanks to the power of the meme lords who his meme army that were much, much better at making funny Facebook posts, because it's one thing to do it like on 4chan or something, or on Reddit, but they did it that once those same images were getting to Facebook, they were winning hearts and minds, right? Because people would both laugh at the leftists, and then they would realize how stupid the leftists are, and then leftists would get outraged, and that would just reinforce it, So that's an Olinsky rule, right? I've now given you the first five, actually. I skipped number 4, which was make the enemy live up to its own book of rules. But that's another very important one. If the left is outraged about Gina Carano having made a post talking about Nazis, and from now on, any time that they talk about Nazis, you should attack the people that did it and say, oh my God, how can you do this? That's, you're denigrating the Holocaust, right? Because they've been doing it for years, right? You need to do the same sort of attacks on them. What we should have done immediately, as soon as somebody saw that Paco Pascual had done a post about kids in cages where he compared the Trump administration to the German administration of in the interwar years. There should have been a mass campaign that said either you fire both of them or neither. Like, you must fire both Paco Pascual and Gina Carano, or neither of the two. And just have been put on the same level of pressure that they put on Lucasfilm. This is why we keep losing, is because they are much better at putting on the pressure. They're no longer better at humor, but they are definitely better at manipulating the rules for their convenience. So you must always, always make them live up to their former statements, right? And live up to what they're arguing. Sad Wings Raging says, which is why they're destroying conservatives from social media, us being better than them, I guess is what you're saying. Have you got a second platform? Well, yes, I do. In fact, I'm on BitChute. I've also got a Rumble account, but I haven't posted anything on it. The point is, take a look at the description of this video and of any of my videos, and you will see at the very top, there's a list of my products, the World of the Last Sun, Star Adventure, Pundit Presents, Medieval Old School Companion, etc., that you will be able to, you could go to any of those to buy them and whatnot. And then there's a PayPal, Patreon, Inappropriate Characters link. And then there's the link to my Mewe, to Minds, both of which I'm on, and both of which I'm likely to stay all right with. There's the RPG site, my own, that I own, so it's a place to talk about RPGs. I'm RPG Pundit on Parler, obviously not very helpful right now, but I still have hopes that they're going to somehow come back. And finally, I have a BitChute channel, which is my backup, which posts most videos from YouTube get posted there. They're auto posted over there. So there you are. So be sure, if you like the cut of my jib and you don't want me to suddenly fall out of your radar when, if probably when, but let's say if, let's hope, if I get wiped out here, then be sure to add me in those places now, right? Just to be safe. All right, so I guess I'm going to leave it at there for tonight. I've gone through enough of the rules myself. There's another 7 of them to take a look at. But I hope that what I've said so far has convinced you to pay some damn attention and to say, look at each of these and say, how do we use this against them? All right? Because I think that's what we need to do. Mariah Sinclair says, I am sick to death of our side turning the other cheek and playing by the rules of polite and civilized society. This is a war. And if you don't want to win, you lose. Exactly, Mariah. You have absolutely got it. And I mean, we're not the only ones, right? Andrew Breitbart said this, and probably a lot of you have seen the gif of him saying it, right? Basically, war. So we're going to have to stop worrying about being polite and nice. That's never helped. I've seen a lot of people in the RPG hobby from the time of story gaming and the Forge and stuff trying to be polite and nice and getting nothing accomplished, all the way to today. And all along the way, I've been honest and I've been direct and I've been, I've stood to all of my own principles, but I have not been polite and I have not been nice, and I've had no problem using their tactics on them. And that's what you have to do. It doesn't mean you give up on all your values. It just means you learn how to argue and how to direct the war of hearts and minds the way they do against them. All right, so I guess that's it for today. If you like this video, please feel free to share it. Thank you to everyone who liked it already. If you haven't liked it yet, please like it. We've got one dislike. Okay, that does happen. If you Yeah, Dracopool says your Mewe and RPG site don't have an HTTP in front of it, so it doesn't have an instant link to go to. Yeah, I don't know why, but I think in the case of Mewe, because maybe, I don't know, maybe you can't just, I think you have to sign up to Mewe before any link will get you there anyway. In the case of the RPG site, well, it's just the RPG site. Just type it out, dude. But anyways, if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, and please feel free to share this video everywhere, and check out all my products, especially my newest products: World of the Last Sun, Star Adventurer, the Old School Companion, the RPG Pundit Presents series. I would be fairly certain that you're going to find something in there. There's 103 issues of RPG Pundit Presents that you're going to like, and it's a great way to support me and a great way for you to get stuff that is going to be of use and help to you in your OSR or D&D gaming. So be sure to take a look at them. I've had so many people, and thank you to so many people. There have been so many people who have sent pictures on Twitter or on Mewe or on other places, Parler, Gab, who have said, who have showed me them getting the books. I love that. I love it when people have told me about, how they've been so happy with it. People have been telling me about the games that they've been running with it. It's wonderful to always get that, and I'm always extremely grateful to everybody who purchases any of my stuff, because I know you don't have to, and I'm glad that it's. I've had very few people say that they weren't satisfied with any of my products, so I'm very glad that it's that people like it, and frankly, that's one of the big messages that I do think is starting to get it into people's heads. Don't buy products from people who despise you, right? No matter how much you might be tempted to for whatever nerdy reason, if you know the people making something would actually want to destroy you, right? Like that they absolutely hate you, don't give them money. Marcelo Sepulveda, I did talk about the Invincible College a little bit. It's still in production. There's new products coming in. There's new parts coming in, artwork and stuff like that. And I've been doing an online play test of it with a select group of people. It's going very, very well. And so far, it's still on schedule as far as I know. So look to it potentially before June of this year. All right, I guess that's everything for everyone. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Currently smoking Davidoff 400 series, Apple. Much better than a Savinelli, by the way, and for a Savinelli. And inside there is Argento Latacchia. Thank you, everyone. Take care.